Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Marilyn Shannon, and this is the Breaking Free Show. And I am so happy to be back. We've had sort of not been here for the last couple of weeks, but I've missed you all, and I know you missed me too. Anyway, it's really nice to have you all here, and thank you so much. And I know that your time is precious. So it's an honor that you're spending it with us, and we will give you one great show today. So before we get started, I just want to say hi to Amnon.
Hello, Marilyn.
How are you doing?
Nice seeing you again.
Now, did you miss me?
Yeah, you became a stranger kind of.
Yeah, I know. 2
who's
weeks.
that lady at the door?
I know. I know, but I'm like your sister.
Sister.
My sister, right?
Sister.
All right. So as we get started with the show, I just want to remind you that you are more than welcome. This is a personal invitation to you to call in anytime you want and chat with us, ask questions, comment, whatever you like, because this show is going to be powerful. So if you are by a phone and you want to use it, you can call in at 919-518-9773, or you can come in on Skype, and that is computers, that's plural, the number 2K voice. Anytime you want, you will come in on Skype voice, not video. And also there's a chat, and you're welcome to join us there. Just put your name underneath the video and ask questions in there, comment, and we'll be monitoring it and all of that stuff. So let me introduce my guests to you today. We have 3 of them, and they are 3 extraordinary ladies that are powerful and have a voice, and you are very fortunate to be here today with us. So let me introduce you to them. We have Denise Dominguez. Hey, Denise.
Hello. How
Hey.
are you, Marilyn? So
I'm
excited
good.
to be here with you and our beautiful sidekicks.
Yes, thank you, thank you. And I'm gonna come back to you in a second. And we have Joy. Hey, Joy.
Hey, Marilyn, how are you?
I'm
Thank you
good.
for having me.
It's my pleasure. And we have Susan. Hey, Susan.
Hey, Marilyn, all the way from Canada.
All
Good
the
to be
way.
here.
Yeah. Well, we have broadcasted. We've had guests from Canada before. Actually, some were floating on an island. So we're happy to have Canadians.
Not me. No
Not
floating.
you. Not you. So thank you for being here. So let's start with Denise, because Denise was originally my contact, and we started talking about doing a show like this several months ago. And Denise invited Joy and Susan on. So let me ask Denise, first of all, to share who she is and then why she invited Susan and Joy.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. So a little bit about me is I am a women's empowerment coach, and I help women who are survivors of post-narcissistic trauma relationships to climb up into creator. And I built my business on my own story of leaving my toxic relationship of over 20 years and being in that type of a relationship. And I didn't know what was actually going on. And so now I educate and support and help women who are coming out of that so that they can see what was really going on, the truth of the matters, and she can heal from it and ultimately create healthy relationships all around her. As I am engaged to be married in the year 2020. I'm super excited about that because I get to share how I came from one type of a relationship and was able to heal and create healthy relationships around me. So if I did it, so can you.
All right, I hear you. And I have a little story too, but I'll hold mine. So now, why don't you introduce Joy and Susan?
So I pick these beautiful women because they too help others in these abusive relationships. So Joy is here locally with us, and Joy and I connected in a networking group, and I just really resonated with what she speaks for and what she does, because her aspect is around the church and what happens in the church. And I think it's just so important because I don't speak that language, and we need somebody to speak that language. So that's why I have Joy here. I think she's a beautiful person, and she's a joy. She's a joy to have. And then Susan, who is my Canadian sister, we have been connected for a few years now. She's so awesome. We've done so much together. She speaks to also abuse, domestic violence, And she gives a different twist on it because in Canada, they do it a little bit differently than they do here in the United States. So her message is so powerful in what she's going to bring to the audience today as well.
Perfect. Well, that was a great introduction. So let's start with Joy. Joy, so
Yes.
tell us a little bit more about you and your ministry.
Well, in 2015, I started Called to Peace Ministries, and our goal, we have a twofold purpose. One is to provide support and practical assistance to survivors of domestic violence, but we also really have a heart for helping churches, especially, come alongside these victims and provide help instead of what their natural tendency tends to be is to try to save marriages, and they sometimes out lives. So we offer lots of trainings for churches and other organizations.
Perfect. And then Susan, and what about you? What else do you want to add?
I just want to add that I'm Susan and I'm the founder of Empowered Her, which is on a mission to create, to get women out of their abusive relationships and to really, really embrace their self-worth. I'm passionate about self-worth, and I'm passionate that they create their big, bold, blissful life after abuse, because it is possible. It is very, very possible.
Yeah, I think I would say it's more than possible. I believe I grew my father, who I love dearly, and I'll go into a little more about that, but I'm pretty sure my father was a narcissist. And, you know, it certainly had a lot to do with the path that my wobbly path throughout my life. And my first book that I wrote was about men, because I realized not every man was going to be like that or maybe healed. So, you know, I come from a little bit of a different perspective. So let's hear a little bit of each of your stories, and let's get into defining what narcissism is. So Denise, why don't you start? Just give us a little bit more of your background and your personal story.
Perfect. So my story is I got married very early, 21 years old, and ultimately was starving for love. So I just went for the first guy who said he loved me, and I jumped into this because truly my expectations of what I wanted in a man were just very shallow. And that's all because of who I was, where I came from, not knowing what self-love was, not being shown what, like you were just describing, Marilyn, what a man is, what he does for a woman, who he is. And so I, young, jumped into it, had a family early on, and the red flags were everywhere, but I was ignoring them. And I know this is going to be a thread through all three of our stories, because, and including yours, Marilyn, because the universe is always showing us the red flags, and it's whether or not we pay attention to them. So I was the type of woman that was like, I'm in. So we got to make this work no matter what red flags come at me. I got to make this marriage work. And we had a family, and there was a lot of things that I didn't put two and two together, that it is what it is, right? What I was experiencing was truly abuse. And so finally, after over 20 years, now we're talking 2011, I finally had the courage to leave. Now I'm in my early 40s, and I had been through a lot. And I finally had the courage to up and leave. And so what I did, because I am go big or go home kind of girl, I didn't just leave. I left the entire state of Florida, where I'm from. And I finally had enough, so much so, Marilyn, that I just completely left everybody and everything behind. I came here to North Carolina with nothing but a futon couch and an air mattress. Because of the experiences that I had been through, the traumas, the dramas, the chaotic life that I had for the past 20 years, I was just done, completely done. And so when I came here to North Carolina, I slowly built myself and my life back up, right? It was all of these things now that I was being aware of. It was looking back at my past and going, oh, wow, this is what it was. And this is who I was. And this is who he was. And then I found myself attracting the same type of.
Okay, hold that. Hold
Okay.
that, because that's a whole nother chunk. And there's some chunks that
Okay.
in what you said that I'm writing down so I don't miss a chunk. So
Okay.
before we go into that kind of a chunk, Joy, why don't you share some of your experience, personal experience?
Okay, well, very much like Denise, I got involved with someone who was abusive at an early age, but I, again, didn't recognize it as abusive. It wasn't physically abusive. And I met him when I was 14, dated him for 8 years. There were all sorts of red flags, but I didn't know the red flags back then. And so I dated him for 8 years, and then we got married. About 3 years into the marriage, it became physically violent, but and I kept trying to work it out. But here's where the faith component really made a difference for me, because I did not believe in divorce. And so just trying to make this marriage work, we separated, we reconciled, we separated, we reconciled. And this pattern went on for 13 years of marriage. Then we ended up separating for the final time, and I continued to try to work on it for another year. And I realized that everywhere that I went, I was hitting my head against the wall. It was hard. Courts weren't very friendly. The church didn't know how to help. There were just no resources. So I promised God, if I live through this, I'll help other women who are in this situation, because it seemed impossible to get out without help.
Mm-hmm. Well, you think you're nuts.
Yeah.
So you need somebody to tell you you're not nuts. Or
That's
that
right.
somebody else's behavior is it's wrong, it's not right, or that's not really the way love should be. So it's confusing. So thank you for sharing that, Joy. Susan, what about you?
Well, my story is physically violent. I married a man. I thought he was Prince Charming, and again, being desperate for love and big blue eyes. And he moved me out away from my family. He bought me a home, something I had never had in my whole entire life, for me and my girls. And we got married in October. And the morning after our wedding, as we were driving out of our honeymoon hotel, he reached over and grabbed my hand, and he said, "Now that you're my wife, you will do as you're told, when you're told, and how you're told." And I thought that he was joking. I thought, oh, that's so funny, so cute, awesome. The next day when we got home and picked up the girls, he made me eat a piece of paper because I wouldn't change my name. And within 6 months of that wedding, I was running barefoot in the wintertime to the police station, running for my life. He had tried to kill me. I left with my 2 baby girls, and we lived in a furnace room. And it was lovely. There was mushrooms growing on the wall and stuff like that. And I started to really live the victim life. I started to drink, do drugs, party with bad boys. I did it all. I mean, if there was guilt and shame to be had, I could have it in spades. I did it all because I just didn't feel worthy of love. And I figured this was the love of my life, and he raped me and tried to kill me. So that's my story.
Wow. All right. So just to remind everybody out there, you are welcome to call in. You have a story to share. You have a question to ask these 3 ladies, a statement, a comment, whatever it is. Please feel free. This is really important. And the opportunity that we all have now to talk about this stuff, the more we learn about this, the more we can help other people as well as ourselves. And that's a big deal, so that we can notice things and that we can be that helping hand that helps somebody know they're not nuts. So 919-518-9773 is our number into our studio, and then computers, that's plural, the number 2K voice. You can come in on Skype if you're anywhere in the world. And then also please join us in our chat. Just put your name under our video, and I'm monitoring it. So if you have any questions, I'll be right there. So let's just define really as quickly as we can, so we can get into what some of the flags are and then how we stop the behavior. Denise, describe what narcissism is.
Well, my version of it is me, 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 me. Everything's about me, right? My wounds are deeper than yours. My situation is worse than yours. I'm better than you. Everything is about the narcissist. When we talk about narcissistic trauma or narcissistic abuse, then we're talking the 2 biggest red flags is control and manipulation. They're very controlling. They're very manipulative. And sometimes I love that you said about the nuts part, feeling crazy, Marilyn, because sometimes we don't even realize we're being manipulated and we doubt ourselves and we question and we think, did I say that? Didn't I say that? And then our head spins and we question ourselves and we do feel crazy. We do feel like we're nuts. So the narcissistic trauma is, you know, cheating on you, lying to you, yelling at you, criticizing you, belittling you, right? These are the things that they do. And financial, the financial part of it, there's financial abuse. Is he withholding the money, giving you an allowance, or are you paying for everything, including his stuff, his family? So there's all these different aspects to what is narcissistic trauma, narcissistic abuse. And that's the simplest term that I can give to women. Like the easiest, simplest term is everything's about them. Every conversation turns around to be about them. And everything about them is just either bigger or better than you.
Right.
And they're not emotionally connected, they're emotionally unavailable, and they can feel no empathy for anybody else.
Right. And it's your fault, not theirs.
Oh, yes.
It's all your fault.
Mhm.
Joy, do you have something to add to that?
Well, I am a certified advocate with the North Carolina Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and so a lot of what Denise just described can be found on a tool called the Power and Control Wheel that the Duluth model came up with. Duluth Domestic Violence Project came up with back in the 1980s. And so it includes many of those traits that she's talking about. It's basically we're talking about a pattern of coercive control, and I love what you said about the crazy, because there is actually a tactic on there called crazy making. And so they make you doubt yourself to the point you don't even know if it's you or them anymore. I have women all the time saying, could you just look at this and tell me if my perspective is off? Or could this be abusive? They don't really even recognize it.
Hmm. Yeah, in fact, and I want to talk about this as well. Chris is mentioning, and there are women who can be narcissistic as well. I mean, I hear it all the time from adults that I have that their mothers are narcissistic. So it certainly is not just men.
Right. I
So
think the
yeah,
physical abuse tends to be more men.
yes, 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 yes. Okay, so yeah, we're going to get into all of this deeper. And Susan, did you have something to add to that definition?
To the definition, I would say that because I come from a physically violent relationship, he also had all of those characteristics. He just had the one big one on top of it, the cherry on top, which was his fist. If he didn't get his way through coercive control, then it was lay a beating on her. That'll get the right answer.
Mm.
So just it has one more level.
And does it matter to understand who that person is or
No.
not? Doesn't matter at all.
I find that there's too much time spent on analysis, which is paralyzing to this women. And just as part of my story, in Canada, when you come from physical, abusively violent relationships, the police actually lay the charges. The woman no longer has any say in it. The police take them away and they lay the charges. You go through the court system. But we have mandatory group counseling that we have to go to. And I remember that it was very much in the victim model. And we all sat around and we told our story. And it was almost like a comparison of who got it worse. And you left there not with any steps to get better or any celebrating your success of being on your own or being grateful for something or anything. It was just this continuous pattern of talking about it so you could understand why it happened. There is no understanding to it. The guy is a jerk. That there That's it.
Yeah.
And it was very debilitating for myself and other women. And I work with women now who are in that struggle because that's the kind of coaching and counseling that they're getting. Let's talk about him. Why?
You make a good point. You make a good point. You make a good point because you make a good point. Denise, what did you want to say about it?
Well, what Susan is saying is absolutely correct. And because why are we going to talk about him? Let's talk about you. How did you get yourself into this situation? What is it about you that attracted this type of personality into your life? You know, all three of us have said in the beginning of this that we were all starving for love. And that's why we chose these relationships and these men. Because if you're coming from a place of lack, that you don't think that you don't have enough love inside of you, then you're going to attract that in somebody else. If you're coming from a place of disempowerment and low self-esteem and low self-worth, then that's exactly what you're going to mirror in your outside world. You're going to attract that same personality.
So what is a flag? You mentioned flags. We all mentioned like red flags. I mentioned orange flags. What is a flag that you would see in somebody in the beginning, let's say in a relationship? Now, we have plenty of people, as I mentioned, children of narcissists, mothers that are narcissists, whatever. But let's just focus right now on relationships. What is a flag that you overlook that is so subtle that you overlook it?
That's a great question, Marilyn. And the first thing that came to my head when you asked me that was, look at the relationships that he already has in his life. Does he have close relationships with his mother, with his family, with his ex-wife, whatever? That's the first thing that came to my mind. What is the relationships that he already has in place? How does he talk about these people in his life? Are they all a bunch of, a-holes? Or, one of the things that attracted me to, to my guy now is that he talks so highly about his ex-wife. So they were married 28 years and now divorced and have 2 children together, but he never said an ill word about her. And that was the main thing that I was just drawn to him, because in the past, there's all these, well, he's a, this and she's a this, and everybody else was to blame for the bad relationship that the narcissist has. So I would say, look at the relationships that are already in place for that person.
Good points. That's really good. What about you, Joy? What would you add to that?
Well, the first thing that came to my mind was extreme jealousy. They can be very possessive acting. So jealousy is one of the number one things that we see, especially with teenage relationships, and a lot of us get into those relationships early in life. Jealousy, always wanting to be in contact with, where are you? What are you doing? So I understand. I'm so glad this happened to me before the age of texting, but I hear their phones will blow up with text messages all day long about where are you? Just trying to keep tabs, controlling, and then this sense of entitlement. And they can be very critical, but not always. I've seen there's different types of abusers, or they have different tactics. They're all pretty much similar, but the tactics can be very different.
Yeah, and you struck a chord with me, Joy, because I did date a gentleman a long time ago before my current husband, and one thing I noticed is if I didn't call him, he would exactly on the time or whatever, and I'm pretty good with that. He would go up and smoke, and that just can't be right. I mean, you don't
Exactly.
need 10 flags. You need 1.
Exactly.
You need somebody who goes up and smoke. You need somebody who calls you too many times. You need somebody who is verbally abusive about somebody. You just need 1. You don't need 10. That's enough to know somebody's not right.
Yeah. They also tend to be, they want to press for you to get serious very early a lot of times, and they tend to be rescuers. I will come in and save the day, and, knight in shining armor a lot
Mm,
of times.
Interesting. And
Mhm.
Susan, I have a question for you. Is From what you know, because you talked about the physical abuse as well, narcissists, are they narcissistic to somebody and then abusive to somebody else pretty much at the same time? But maybe not at do you know what I mean? Like, are there men, women, whatever, that have that narcissistic relationship, but then get physically abusive to somebody else?
He was a narcissist. He was definitely a narcissist. I mean, everything was about him. He could do anything better than anybody else. And as Denise said, he spoke very ugly about his mother, his father, his family, his brothers, his everybody was a jerk. That being said, yeah, he was a narcissist, but he had that extra special gene, that one for being physically abusive when he didn't get his own way. But the one thing I will say about the signs, the red flags, one of the earliest red flags that you're going to find, and if you're in any way, like I was, desperate for love, and as Denise said, not knowing what a healthy, loving relationship is, and Joy has said it too, the very first thing they do is within 5 minutes, they're madly in love with you. They can't live without you. You were the one they were looking for all along. And if inside of us, we're desperately seeking love, we fall for it. We're like, oh, yay, great, take me. I'll be with you forever if you love me that much. So that is one of the big ones. They do this love, I love you right from the get-go. I think with my special abuser, I think it was within 2 or 3 days. He was madly in love with me. And I gobbled it up because I was desperate to be loved.
Okay, so there's a comment on the chat, and that is from Lilybird, and she said, "Abused spouse, not necessarily love-starved. Initial behavior of narcissists, very convincing." Okay, I need for you to tell me more about that, because that doesn't tell me enough. Does it tell any of you enough?
I get it.
You do? Okay, explain it.
I see it all the time. We do support groups for ladies, and one of the things they tell me, it can be somebody who's love starved, but it can also be just somebody who grew up with a normal normal family life, and they
Um,
didn't really feel that deficit, but then they change. I've had women say as soon as the wedding happened, he was a different man. I mean, even you, Susan, said that a little bit. He changed. And so it doesn't always, they can be fooled. They can fool people as well.
mhm. But there's gonna be a flag. There's
Some,
gonna be a flag.
not as strong. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
I had one lady, her husband was in ministry. He was a youth pastor, and the only thing is she saw him one time get a little upset, and she thought, well, that was, it was because she excused it, but she said there were maybe only 2 red flags the entire time they dated, which was over a year. So it's not always. I mean, everybody's different, and but it can be. So I know what she's saying.
Mm. So what do we I do wanna talk about the church stuff, because I think that's very interesting. Explain that a little bit more.
Well, as I was going through it, being a Christian woman, I reached out to my church. My church just never really knew how to deal with it. And I had gone to a very conservative church, as a teenager with him. And they would say, you have to submit to your husband. And so I had a lot of baggage, spiritual baggage coming into it, thinking that that was what God wanted for me in my life, that I had to stay and put up with it. But I also see that kind of counsel coming out from churches. We come alongside now and try to help churches deal with it better, to have a better understanding. Because with narcissism, it's not night and day clear all the time. And sometimes people will go to their churches, and maybe that one little incident didn't sound abusive, but if you look and you put it together with a whole pattern of everything that's happening, then that's where it's uncovered. And we find sometimes our survivors can't really put into words what they need to say to help people see it more clearly. So we actually help them, show people a little more clearly what they're
Mhm.
going through.
Denise, do we have a narcissistic system?
A system?
Yeah, is our system narcissistic? Is there do you know what I mean?
It is growing, unfortunately, in leaps and bounds. And that's a great question, Marilyn, because I do see it in certain um, religions, like Joy is saying, and cultures. There's some cultures that breed narcissistic behavior, right? And I just want to go back for a second when we were talking about the quickly loving on you. I want the viewers to really get that what we're describing is called love bombing.
Called what?
This love bombing.
Uh,
Yeah. And this is when you barely know this guy or you barely know this girl, and all of a sudden she's in love with you or he's in love with you, and they want to get married in a short amount of time. Or like you were saying about the texting, where are you? I'm just concerned about you. I just need to know you're okay, right? So they twist it to be about, I love you and I just want to, make sure you're good, I'm protecting you. But actually what they're doing is controlling. And so as I don't want to say victim, but the one on the other side is thinking, oh, he just loves me and he just wants to know I'm okay. And so we misinterpret what's really going on. So there's a perfect example of a red flag that you might not see as a red flag, right?
And what about age? I mean, I'm imagining that it's happening very young too.
I was very young. I was 19. And but I will say I have clients that are in their 40s that are experiencing this or have experienced this. And so it really boils down to two things: the love you have for yourself and recognizing all of the pieces of you. So when we're attracting these types of personalities into our life, I can almost guarantee you we come from this personality type. And if you don't see that, I know through my experience, Marilyn, like you were saying, there are women that are narcissistic. For me, it was my mom. It is my mom. And I didn't see that part of my mom in her. And so I didn't see that part of me. And so I attracted that in my outside world. So this gets kind of deep, but basically what it means and what it is that if you have a mom who's 100% Italian and a dad who's 100% Irish, you are 50% Italian and 50% Irish. Now, whether or not you like spaghetti and meatballs, you're still 50% Italian, whether you like it or not.
Mhm.
Is that understandable?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it's like bullies, bullies bully because they've come from a bully. Is
I
not
wanted to
y
say
go
something.
ahead, go.
Sorry,
No,
I'm,
no, don't ever say you're sorry on my show.
I'm Canadian. It's a thing. Um, I wanted to say what Denise has brought up is a very important point, and it's getting mixed up with victim blaming. And this is becoming a sad, sad situation where when you approach a woman, as Denise and I both do in our work, and I'm not that familiar with Joyce, and say to them that where you came from, your inner child wound, whatever you want to call it, is what brought this to you. You attracted this to you. Women are now standing up and saying, don't say that you're victim blaming. We're not victim blaming. We're actually helping this person by saying, when you go inside and you heal this inside, then you will have a healthy relationship. Then you will co-create your life with somebody. Then you will see your value and your worth. But until you do that, you will just have a repetition and a repetition. For me, it was dealing with the fact that I had childhood abandonment issues from a very young girl. I didn't really even recognize that until I went deep within myself. But I would like to stop this quick and irrational, you're victim blaming. We're not victim blaming. We are sincerely moving women forward in their lives and helping them.
So, are you in a relationship now, Susan?
I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And for him, it wasn't easy in the beginning. I really was not healed enough, and I really could have backed away. But I really loved at that point being a victim of domestic violence. It really fit me because I could be a bitch, I could be unhappy, I could do mean things, I could do all of this stuff because I was a victim of domestic violence. You couldn't talk to me a certain way because then you were victim blaming. And I've now come to realize that we are not doing women any favors by keeping them in that mode of thinking.
It's covering it up.
Exactly.
Mhm. And we don't wanna do that today. We wanna expose all of this. That's what I love so much about the show is on some level, I like taking, conversations and commercializing them to a degree so that we talk about it. It becomes common knowledge what a narcissist looks like. Everybody knows. So we're
Yeah.
not covering it up. So once again, 919-518-9773 and computers 2K voice is our Skype. if you want to come in and ask questions. And also, please feel free to come in our chat. We would love to have you. Denise, what were you going to say?
I wanted to tailgate on what Susan was saying, because just like a lot of things that we do in life, right? We put a Band-Aid on it and we move on. But what happens every single time, guaranteed, you're going to attract the same type of situations, the same type of people. Now, maybe it might not be in a spousal relationship. Maybe it'll be friendships. Maybe it'll be at work. But you're going to attract the same things until you heal those wounds. So like Susan was saying, we tend to, let's just get a quick fix, right? Let's take a pill and make it all better and let's move on with life, right? Because that's too deep, or I don't want to deal with that. It's too much pain, whatever it is. And we look for a quick fix. But just like, I don't want to get into pharmaceutical drugs, but just like that, if you take a pill for something, you're just masking what's really going on. When you say, and this is what I always talk about, is let's just call it what it is and let's just tell the truth about it. That's why Susan and I are like, because, and same with Joy, like, let's not cover it up. Let's not sugarcoat it. Let's not call it something else. Let's make it sound really sweet and good to get people in. No, let's tell the truth of what's really going on so that we can go in deep and heal it. When you think of an emotional wound, think of an external wound. Now, some people, we're all wounded. Okay, that's a fact. We're all wounded. But some people's wounds are deeper than others. So when you look at an external wound, what's the first thing that you do to heal it? Well, first you got to look at it and face it. Okay, this is what's going on. And now it's going to hurt, right? But I got to heal it, or else it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So when you look at an external wound, you go to clean it. You got to clean it first, right? And there's all these steps that we go to heal an external wound, but what we're doing with the emotional wounds is so much the same. It's just cleaning is telling our truth.
Right. Yeah,
Right?
I know that with some of these relationships, I think your advice maybe would be get out. As soon as you recognize it, get out. And then there are some, like with my father. I'm growing up with this man who I love. He's my daddy. He did so many things for me growing up, but it's not so easy just to get out. But it left an impression. I was one of those women who, couldn't look a man straight in the face, didn't know what kind of men to date. And I guarantee I dated some men that were not the men I should have been dating. So took a long time to get through it. I think another good topic for us to talk about is how we heal. What are the
Perfect.
steps we can do to heal? Because some people are, like I said, they're with the mother, they're with the father, it's the brothers. You get out when you can, but what do you do to heal when you're out? So who wants to start?
Oh,
Yeah,
go
you can
ahead.
start. Go ahead. That's good. What do you do,
I
Denise?
was just gonna say, the first step into healing is you gotta, like I was saying, you gotta face the truth. You gotta look at yourself. You gotta go deep into you. Everything begins and ends with you.
So tell me one thing. How bad is it? When you're in it, how bad is it?
It depends on the level of it depends on how deep the wounds are. So that's why I love to give the analogy or the metaphor of the external wounds, because my wounds may not be as deep as, let's say, Susan's wounds or Joy's wounds, or vice versa. Their wounds may be less deep as mine. So it depends on how deep the wound is. For me, in my experience, I don't feel, looking back, I don't feel like it was that bad, but I was also ready to dive in.
Mhm.
But for somebody who, and Joy and Susan can totally give their aspect of their own healing and what they see with their clients, but if you're not ready, then I feel like it's going to hurt a lot more. If you're just doing it because you keep attracting the same crap and this is what you got to do, it's going to hurt more until you embrace it. until you just come to the realization like, this is a part of life and I got to do this to move on.
Mhm. I know for myself, I mean, it was bad. I mean, growing up as it was bad. I mean, there was never a day where you knew exactly what you were gonna get. I mean, it was bad. I can think about times we went on vacations and I mean, it was war. So it was just really bad. And those wounds, had I known differently, and I was older, might have been different, but I mean, I love men now. I can see men now. My first book was about men and their healing, but it was bad. So, what do you think, Joy?
Well, I think that we talk. Both Denise and Susan are talking about these deep wounds that we had in ourselves before, and I still want to go back to that caller or the lady that typed in about maybe you don't have that. But what I think is that we get brainwashed when we get into these relationships. These guys or gals or whoever they are, they the first blow up teaches us something. Ooh, I won't do that again. And
Mhm.
so over time, we change the way we think about ourselves, and
So
and we and
true.
our self
Yes.
concept changes to the point that it's so unhealthy that we almost think we deserve it. And I don't think I thought I deserved it in the beginning, but I sure did by the end. And so our steps to healing, of course, for in a Christian context, first we've got to correct ourselves, our view of ourselves, and then we have to correct our view of God. Because for me as a Christian, I actually thought that He was on my husband's side because He would use Scripture and like pound me over the head with it. So
Mhm.
you've got to correct misconceptions and basically lies that you come to believe.
And you're dealing with and I mean, talking about a church system is a bit pretty tough system to go against.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a tough system to go against.
It is, and so it's like they're having to break out on all levels. It's like their husband or partner is telling them that they're wrong, and they've begun to doubt themselves. And then they go to a church that's supposed to be there to help them. And a lot of times, the churches will basically reinforce what their husband is telling them. Not always, not all of them, but it does happen, and that's why we're here.
So Lily Bird is asking, is there ever a time to stay in a marriage when the NPD, an illness, and something the abuser tries to change to save the marriage?
Well, it's been my experience that these guys don't change. They change very rarely. I think that statistically, when I was working at the domestic violence shelter, it was between 3 and 5% will change spontaneously. If they get intervention, and it usually has to be somebody who actually has its expertise in domestic violence, the statistics are still probably 50% or lower. And it has to be somebody who is such an expert that it usually requires a separation for at least a year. Some people say 3 to 5 years. Is that
Mhm.
how long? If you're willing to stick in there that long. But again, like Denise says too, there are degrees of narcissism, some of them that you can tolerate and some of them that you just can't.
Mhm. I don't know. I'd find it very hard to tolerate any of these things.
Well, it's like you said, your mom loved her. I'm sure she loved your dad and you loved him. And so it's a very difficult thing to try to decide to leave.
Mhm.
I tend to think that in most situations, that separation is the best thing to start with. Um, anyway,
Yeah.
we could talk all day,
Oh,
and
we can talk forever.
yeah, it's very complex.
But this
Sorry.
is serious, and, we do a lot of shows here that are funny and lighthearted. This is serious, but it's a serious topic, and, you know, gotta talk about it.
Saving these relationships is very difficult. I don't think it's impossible, but I've only seen it like a handful of times out of hundreds of cases.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it has a lot to do with how much you are invested and want to invest, because there's no guarantees, and along the way, it's painful.
And finding the right help, you've got to find people who are experts in it, and that's very difficult too.
Here's a question on the chat. I had a narcissistic parent. Do you find that the more you fight back and assert yourself, the angrier and more threatening the narcissist becomes? Who's
So
got
when
an
you
answer? Go ahead. Yeah.
had the narcissistic parent, right?
Yeah. Do they fight
Yeah.
back harder when you resist?
Yes.
They do.
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
They don't like that. You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to be demure and polite and do as you're told and acquiesce the power to them. So if you try to challenge them and fight back, no, they don't like that. It will get worse. And I do believe, going back to the healing of a narcissist, um, one of the rarest diagnoses out of psychiatry is narcissistic personality disorder. They can trick psychiatrists, and it's so very rarely diagnosed that it's very hard to treat. And the problem with it is, because they can fool people, how
Mhm.
do you get true diagnosis, and how do you get them help? They don't see themselves as needing help. They're perfect.
Right. And they're
They're,
charming.
yeah,
They're
and they're
they're
charming. They can charm the
charismatic.
pants off anybody.
Right. They're charismatic, they're charming. They look great. And that's also confusing because take a look at this man or this woman who has all of these amazing attributes, and you look and go, why am I not being grateful for this?
Yeah,
Right?
because they treat you like crap.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, so please feel free, anyone out there. Once again, 919-518-9773 or computers 2K voice on Skype, and you have plenty of time to join our chat and ask questions. And, if it gets personal, you don't have to give your name. That's fine. But we'd love to hear from you. And I think that might be a good time now for each of you just to share for our audience where they would find you, because there might be some people out there that need that extra help or want that big help and don't know where to go. So, Susan, why don't you share about you, the work you're doing, and where they can find you?
Okay, I'm Susan Ball, and I can be found at www.susanball.ca. And I work with women who are usually at the point where they want to heal something. They recognize that there's something inside of them that is drawing this drama to them in their lives. They're done with the victim blaming thing. They're done with being a victim, and they want to live their life. Being a victim, one of the things that I talk about a lot, is that when we're a victim, we hang on to that, we cling on to that desperately because we're afraid of what's on the other side. It becomes our identity. And stepping away from our victim identity is very difficult, because what's on the other side? Well, on the other side is you're really big and you're really bold and you're really blissful life, because that's where you start to make all the internal changes. So I have a couple of books available on Amazon: Courage and Grace, which is my story and helps you through some of the healing. And another book called You Plus Joy, which is a lot of women who got together and healers to give you tips on finding that joyful place again, little exercises that you can do. And those are both available on Amazon. So that's where you can find me.
Perfect. And what about you, Denise?
I love what Susan just said. Thank you, Susan. You made it so much easier to say. Yeah, I work with the same type of women. Like, they're ready to up level their life. They're done with the crap. They're done with the trauma. They're done with the drama. They're ready to see what's next for me in life. So people can find me at my website. It's denisedominguez.com, DOMINGUEZ.com. And there they can opt in for a free gift. And there's also all my social media links where they can connect with me. I do offer a complimentary coaching call. And Susan and I actually were a part of a book. She didn't mention it, but it was called A New Day Dawns, Breaking Up with Abuse. That was another co-authored book that we did together. And my new book is coming out the end of this month, June 21st, called Empower the Woman Within, Stepping into Total Freedom. Because, ladies, that's what it's about. When Susan described what's on the other side, joy, freedom, amazement, you have no idea what's on the other side until you take that step toward it. But that does come with you being courageous and brave and loving yourself, finally loving yourself to the point where you're like, I deserve better. I deserve better in life. And now I'm going to get it. So that's where they can find me, Marilyn. Thank you so
Perfect.
much.
And what about you, Joy?
They can find me at calledtopeace.org, CALLEDTO, and then peace, like peace out. That is our ministry website. I actually have a book called To Peace as well. It tells my story. It has the second half of the book is actually what I consider to be the keys to healing, which starts with telling yourself the truth and then overcoming strong emotions, walking outside, moving out from that victim mentality, like Susan's been talking about. Again, we're based here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we have local support groups, but we also have an online support group, so they can actually contact us through the website if they're interested.
So from anywhere in the world, anybody out there from anywhere in the world can get help from these three ladies. And I want to say that I wouldn't be doing this show if I didn't feel that the subjects that we bring you also teach and show and share and inspire you to freedom. I would not be who I am today if it wasn't for working on myself. Because as a young little girl, I was surrounded by narcissistic men and I loved them. They were my uncles, they were this, they were that, they were my father. But I will tell you, and that's all you know, that's all you know. And I grew up, not understanding anything. I remember being in a group therapy session one day, and my therapist turned around and asked me, "Well, what do you want?" And I will never forget that moment and that feeling of my throat just kind of dumping into my stomach. I had no idea about anything that I wanted. Nothing, because I was never asked and I was never given the chance to figure it out. And I will tell you, I have come a long way, my loves out there. And if I can, anybody can. So, there is no way that you would ask me now, what do you want? And I won't have an answer, except if the choices are too much. So anyway, here's another statement from Lily Bird. During a counseling session, she said, my spouse started arguing with the counselor because he disagreed with something he said about his behavior against me. That is not uncommon, is it?
No.
No. Authority. What's authority mean to a narcissist?
They usually don't like authority and any idea of anybody being authority over them because they are the ultimate authority. And they will not only argue with them, but then they'll turn around and charm them. And they know how to speak their language. They're very good. I love what Susan says. They know how to fool people. I mean, if you read my book, I fell for it over and over and over again. That's why I say if you don't have, and most counselors get no training. I have a master's degree in biblical counseling from the seminary here in Wake Forest, but I got no training on domestic violence. I got 15 minutes and it was not really the best. So you've got to have people who understand it to even begin to help you with it.
Yeah, really. And here's another question. What do Susan, Joy, and Denise think about this quote? Hate is the complement of fear, and narcissists like being feared. It abuses it. It's what do you think about that? Let's see. It imbues them with intoxicating sensation of omnipotent. I can say that word now.
Omnipotent.
Yes. What do you think about that?
I agree with that so much because when my spouse chased me to the police station, he started fighting with all the police officers because he kept telling them it was none of their business. Mm-hmm. And the part that I loved the best about that story was that it was a young female police officer who was much shorter and smaller than him who put him down on the ground and put him in handcuffs in one fell swoop. It was brilliant. But he was down in the jail cell screaming at the top of his lungs that no one had any right to put him down there. He hadn't done anything wrong. Well, at the same time, I'm upstairs being photographed for all the bruises on my neck and so on and so forth. And he's still arguing with authority that he did nothing wrong, nothing.
Well, that's where people get crazy here. Was they think that abuse is only something where you get actually physically hurt. That is not the only way to be abused.
Nope.
Emotional abuse, narcissistic abuse is abuse, abuse, abuse. So know that. And here's another question, which I think is a really good one. Are narcissists born or made?
Made, created.
They're born
They're
that
not
way?
born.
Are you saying they're born that way?
They're not born that way. They're
They're not.
created.
They're created. What creates them?
Childhood,
Childhood.
the circumstances of their home and being brought up. So the majority of them, and I'm sure Joy and Susan will agree with this, the majority of them are created through the traumas and experiences that they had in their childhood. Although there are some narcissists that are created that didn't experience any trauma or drama. They were just put on a pedestal by mom and dad. They were put on this, so they didn't experience any abuse or anything like that. But in their world growing up, they were the shit. They were the shining golden child.
Mhm.
And so when a child goes through life and being praised all the time, then why would anything change when they get into adulthood? My whole life, I've been put on a pedestal. I'm this beautiful, golden, perfect kid. Well, it's going to carry on into adulthood. And then on the flip side, a child might not go through any traumas or dramas, but was neglected, which neglect is abuse. But I'm saying there wasn't no traumatic abuse. So they go through their whole life being neglected. And so nothing was about them. So they get into adulthood and they make it about them.
Mhm. So we really have to be careful parents have to be really careful with their
There has to be a
children.
balance.
There has to be a balance. Be really
Mhm.
careful with your children as far as bullying, as far
Mhm.
as you see your kids, being sarcastic. All of that is dangerous and a prerequisite for narcissism,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
So we are almost out of time, but not quite. So, and I'm going to want the three of you to come back, if you will, because I think there's plenty more to talk about. So, in the final moments that we have, Joy, what do you want to add? What do you want to help somebody with? What do you want to tell everyone? What do you want us to know? Joy.
Well, like Denise said, you don't have to stay a victim. Number one thing to do is, first of all, admit the truth to yourself, even though the truth can be very painful. And then, as Susan said, you don't have to remain a victim. There are ways out, and finding somebody who can lead you through that process. I guess we're all kind of like midwives, right? We help them birth out of the abuse and move forward into a life. As tell people I move from victim to victorious.
That's great. So find someone that you can confide in, find a counselor, find a friend, a family member, find somebody that you can look at and know that you can talk, that can help you, because sometimes you need somebody on the outside
Yes.
to help you. And that's really important, but do not stay. Susan, what about you? Susan?
Sorry, I'm
Eh,
just going to add to that. First of all, if you're two things I want to add to the creating a narcissist. If your child is bullying somebody and you go to the school and defend your child, you're creating a really raging narcissist.
Right.
That's the first thing. The second thing is when you seek out a friend, seek out the true friends, not the friends that will agree with you. It was my healing started when a true friend actually had the courage to say to me, your victim story is really effing boring. Can we talk about something else? And even though I was angry, that was my healing moment. So seek out people who aren't the head nodders, the people who will actually talk to you honestly about your situation. And lastly, I would like to say there is a life after abuse. And it's if you take the time to get in touch with who you are and who you want to be and what you want to create for your life, and you heal all of that, your life will blossom. You will blossom, and the journey is worth it.
It really is. I triple ditto. Denise, you have any final words of wisdom?
I just always end it with love yourself. Love yourself. Ask yourself the questions. Am I worth this? Is this me? Who am I? Like you said, Marilyn, what do I want out of life? Answer that question and be kind to yourself. When you look at yourself in the mirror, pull out all the positive and beautiful things about yourself instead of going into straight criticism of yourself, because you're beautiful and you're perfect just the way you are.
And I love that. And I would add, love yourself more than somebody else says they do.
Absolutely.
You know, love yourself more. Nobody can love you more than you love you. And if somebody is saying that, it can't be true. It just cannot be true. And
That's right.
it just can't. So anyway, you have my book up there by any chance? Okay, so here's my book, In Just One Afternoon, Listening to the Hearts of Men. And I wrote it because, I interviewed 20 some odd men about their life stories because I didn't always trust men, as you can tell. And I wanted to understand men. And when I was coaching women and I was coaching men, I found, oh my God, there are some good ones. There are a lot of good ones. And even the ones that have tragic stories have some good endings too. So you can find my book on Amazon, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks, you will see In Just One Afternoon, Listening into the Hearts of Twins. So I want to thank the three of you so much for being here. It was wonderful, beautiful. Thank you for sharing your personal stories with our audience and for opening up. And I know today we all have made a difference, and that is a really good feeling.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Joy, and thank you, Susan.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And I will love to invite you back again and, get into it some more because I know that we just touched the surface. All right.
I'd be
So,
happy to.
Yeah, thanks. So everyone out there, thank you so much for being with us today. I look forward to seeing you next week. Have a wonderful day and keep your ears, your eyes, your nose, everything open. Just keep it open. See the red flags that are around you and see the red flags that might be around somebody else. And with that, I love you. Have a great day. Bye.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.